So I've been reflecting recently just how strange the life of a consultant is. In my first video that I did on this channel, I just spent about 3 months working for a client in town, and all of a sudden that project was over and I found myself working for the last couple of weeks from home, which has been great. And this is my home. This is Hout Bay, a town in Cape Town in South Africa, and it's where I live. And I've been doing a lot of software demos of our CRM software. I've done demos for all over the world. I did a banking demo in Namibia. I did a financial services investment funding demonstration for a company based out of the Ivory Coast in Africa. And I did a demo for a bunch of guys in Israel, in Tel Aviv, on insurance in CRM. And I thought I'd make this third episode in my CRM series about the things that I've learned over a career of doing these kind of demos, best practices, tips and tricks. So I hope you find it useful.
So for me, the thing about getting demos right is it's all about preparation. I'm going to talk about a particular example that is about banking. The first thing I needed to do was do a bit of research. Pretty much this is the pattern that I follow for every demo that I do. I've got a whole lot of examples of previous projects that we've been involved with. Obviously what you're looking to do is pick out the best bits from those that are going to look good in a demo and speak to this particular customer. In this particular customer's case, they sent an email and they said, listen, we want to see the following. So for example, they said they wanted to see a single view of customer, and they wanted to cover retail, corporate and treasury banking. For example, they wanted to see a customer onboarding, where a customer walks into a branch and based on an ITC check, putting in an ID number, they would be able to return the customer's details. They wanted to see complaints management. They were interested in the Outlook integration with Dynamics. They wanted to see some stuff on mobility and reporting in Dynamics. Really, that's all they gave me actually. And I took the opportunity, since the person who's organizing the demo for me was quite responsive, to ask a couple more questions. And I added a couple of extra things over and above what was in the email based on those questions. It's important to gather whatever information you can ahead of the demo. I then spoke to a couple of other subject matter experts in banking inside our team. So we've got some consultants who spend a lot of time in banks. And I spoke to 2 or 3 of them. Got a feel over and above with my own experience of what we as a business have done and what is commonly the issues and what is found, and then getting into nitty gritty of what kind of entities have we done, what kind of functionality have we delivered on Dynamics. And I also did a competitor search and searched for something like Dynamics 365 banking, and I think I did that on images, and I scanned through some examples. I did the same thing on videos, and it's quite revealing what is out there. People have got either demos they've put up online or screenshots that give an indication. And what I did on the back of that was I then prepared what I call a detailed data plan. So it's an Excel spreadsheet. And for example, I knew that we would need to show the contact entity in Dynamics. This is really the people entity if you're not familiar with Dynamics. So specifically for banking, over and above the standard fields that are in the system, I knew that we would need a couple of extra. I took fields that I thought would be representative of typical banking scenario. And again, you don't need tons of fields to demonstrate a theme. So for example, having the ability to show the total assets and liabilities of a person in a retail banking scenario, grouping that under a heading of KYC, or Know Your Client, which is a legislative requirement for you to be able to know your customer when you're engaging with them by banking. And I knew that that would appeal and immediately be recognized and understood by people in the banking industry when I'm demonstrating the system. I did the same thing on the account entity. So in the corporate banking scenario, where your client is a company or an organization. And then in some of the screenshots, for example, I was seeing things like an eligible product. So I'll show you the demo in a minute. But what I was imagining here is we would need to see products that a banking customer might be eligible for. So this is data that could be generated through artificial intelligence, and then putting this into the CRM system to show to anybody who's interacting with that customer the products that we could sell to this customer within the banking scenario. I had a product holding. So for example, in a banking scenario, we may have a savings account, a home loan, a current account with an overdraft. I've got a section, so I thought if there's a section called corporate profile, and the fields that are related to that are going to be grouped into it. You'll see, if you're familiar with Dynamics, you'll know what a section is, but it's a user interface grouping of these fields. So I took that into account. I put in the name that I was thinking to give this field, to put in the type. So in the case of product, on an editable product, we need to be a list of values, or an option set as it's called in Dynamics. And then I've listed out the values. Maybe it's important to note here, I'm not putting every single field that's already on these entities. So really this is just to get my thoughts together, this whole planning process in Excel. Occasionally the customer will give you a request for proposal or literally demo instructions. And what I tend to do there is really follow that religiously. You know, the customers put those requirements in place when they're viewing your demonstration. They're looking to test whether you have those capabilities. So I feed that straight back to them. I cover it in the order that I've requested it. I typically pull up their original document and I show them that I've understood and recognized the information they're asking. So the next thing I do is I start thinking about what I'm going to cover. And I guess this is a bit of an iterative process. I'm not doing one then the other. I'm kind of adding to them as I think of things and as I'm going through it. I put together then a demonstration script. And for this particular demo, this is what it looked like. Remember, this is for my purposes. I typically keep it available to me during the demonstration. A little bit like now, I've got my iPad next to me here. So while I'm demonstrating something on the screen to the customer, potentially on a projector or over Microsoft Teams or some kind of web demo, but I've then got my notes in OneNote open on my iPad. So the script is very much for my purposes. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm conscious of the order in which I'm showing things. I typically like to keep things, as I said, in the order of the priority to the customer, but also I need to show things that are going to explain things that are going to follow later. So typically the starting point in a CRM demo is talking about customer. So in this case, that's about the account entity and the contact entity in Dynamics. And in both cases, I've set up a 360-degree view with all of these entities that I showed you on that detailed data planning spreadsheet. And I am then showing them the custom information with all of the banking related information. I'm covering key information. So for example, when we're talking about organizations in a banking scenario, typically these are grouped in hierarchies. So we may have a parent account with sub-accounts in a corporate structure. And then once I've covered customer information, I'm moving on to sales related information. And these are not covering everything that I'm going to show, but it's prompts for me to, in the heat of the demonstration, and especially in the early part of it when you're feeling nervous, it's a guide that if you get lost along the way or if you get distracted by questions, you can come back to it and kind of look at it as a checklist that you can make sure that you've covered everything. And probably the main thing is to actually do the preparation. By the time you get to the demonstration, you don't really need the script. If you have put in all the effort of going through it and making sure that you know what you're going to cover when, typically it's in your head and you're prepared. I guess what's also important in these demo scripts is there's going to be some functionality that the customer has said that they are wanting to see. The other part of it is functionality that is features of Dynamics 365 or features of the CRM system that we as sales folk want to show. These are either sexy features that look great or they're very useful functionality that potentially customers don't know about. So we want to weave in both of these criteria. And typically what I want to do is I want to start with the things that the customer would be having on their checklist to make sure that they've got done. They've asked, can we do banking? They want to see banking CRM, and I would show that first. Potentially interweaving in that, but maybe a little later then, is features that they may not have asked for, but I do want to show. So for example, integration with Microsoft Teams is something that I've left to the last. It's probably something that by the time they're satisfied that they've seen their requirements outlined, they may then be paying attention to, okay, great, you have some extra bells and whistles. So a key part of preparing these scripts is to anticipate the questions you're going to get. There may be a new feature that's recently been released in Dynamics, and nothing more embarrassing than being asked about that feature and you don't know anything about it and you're not prepared. So typically this is last minute. These demos always come up at the last minute. There's never enough time to prepare, and you're scrambling, doing late nights trying to get everything ready. But what I do is I make sure that I make a note of those things that could trip me up, and if I do get time ahead of the demo, I've made a note to go and either prepare something to show or something to go and research and just make sure ahead of the demo. Sometimes I'm driving to the venue to go and present, and I'm doing the last checks from the car, looking at some videos on YouTube or whatever it might be. Recently I attended a course by a Canadian company called Neural Impact. They've studied the neuroscience behind how our people and companies and organizations buy software, enterprise business software, and frankly most other things. And a big part of this is about speaking to their tribal view of themselves as being part of, in this case, the banking industry. So it's very important to research banking, understand the terminology they use. It's not as hard as it sounds. A couple of Googles and you'll get a lot of information about what is important in banking and key terminology that you can just throw into your demonstration. That KYC, or Know Your Customer example, is a great case in point. So typically what you're wanting to do in these scripts is to mention the feature that you're showing, but then kind of have a point in that you summarize to say, so that, so this feature has the following business benefit. And it may seem apparent and obvious in what you presented, but never assume that. When you're demonstrating to people that are not used to looking at features in software and are used to running businesses, sometimes you need to lead them and actually say, just remember that this is what you're going to get with this feature. Part of the neural impact message is also that very often people are motivated by pain. In fact, 90% of people are more motivated by pain than they are by reward. So what you're doing when you're talking about business benefits is also harping on the business pain that you're solving. Remember, what you're doing here is not training. What you are doing is you're painting a picture of a world where they've got access to this incredible tool that is going to help them in their business. So what you're trying to do is show that it's real, that you have functionality that you can touch and feel and look at. But while you're doing that and you're pushing the buttons and showing the fields, you are telling a story. And the story is one of the business benefits of a customer-centric software system in the world of banking. And I guess what that's also about is trying to get that story across with as few clicks as possible. Nothing worse than that awkward silence while you're busy trying to wait for a screen to load, or even worse, you're getting an error. So it's a matter of testing this ahead of time, checking your script, making sure that it flows, and again, without having to kind of go back to screens and reopen them, that you're fluidly flowing through the story. If you're doing demonstrations as part of a team, it's very important to prepare as a team ahead of time. Make sure that in your demo script, it's extremely clear who's going to be covering what, and then in a team situation, you really want to let the person who's driving at the time drive the conversation. I've seen too many team scenarios where people trip over each other and they haven't done the preparation, and it just comes across as really awkward. What I try and do with all of my demos is avoid generic. I've found from hard-earned experience that showing generic functionality, generic CRM, goes over the head of most people. It really has its power and is understood when you are showing real examples. And this is about having real data, if nothing else. So if your customer doesn't look like a banking customer and you're trying to explain the concepts of how CRM would apply to banking, it's going to be wholly unsuccessful. So, using test records, Joe blogs, and XYZ company, not a good idea. Most business buyers, as opposed to IT buyers, are buying an outcome. So very often how you're capturing records in your CRM system is not of interest to them. It's the outcome that is of interest. So in your demos, try and show dashboards, show reporting. And again, you may not have a lot of data and you may not have it very fleshed out, but you can show very little and then paint the story. Tell the picture of what they're going to get from this information and make that real for them. So once we've set up our demo script and we have completed our detailed data planning spreadsheet with all of the fields that we need to set up and all the entities we need to set up, we're ready to do the easy part and the fun part, and that is to create all of this in the system. So we go into Dynamics. We can now go into the customization section of the system, and we can add all of the fields that we need. So for example, for our eligible products, we can go ahead and add an eligible products entity. Of course, this demonstration I've already set up. And we can then go ahead and add all of the fields that we've put on our detailed data planning spreadsheet. So typically what I do is I stick on my headphones and I get cracking and I cut and paste. Once we've set up everything in the system, it's a matter of then doing a run through of the demo against the demo script. So what we're looking to do is make sure that everything flows, that we haven't forgotten anything, that we set up everything correctly in the system. So for example, what I would do is I would have an example of an account. In this case, I set up one like this. Small things, I would make sure that, for example, the currency is correct for the country in which you're going to present. This happened to be for an organization in Namibia, so this is in Namibian dollars. I've included a picture on the account, and you'll see I've done it on the contact as well. I've added for my own user. So you're really trying to make it as graphical as possible. You'll see, for example, I put in a real address so that the Bing map will show up correctly. These are kind of things that just make the system quite visually appealing when you're looking at it. Typically what I do with my demo environment is I have one demo environment that I use for all of my demos. This is handy because very often I can either reuse data or reuse scenarios that demonstrate something. If you've got a banking demo, typically what I do is I put it on a separate, what's called a role-based form in Dynamics. So in other words, you're looking at a screen that you can change. So in this case, if I switch to my banking demo, I've got a product information tab. You'll recognize my KYC section with key fields for account. I've got a summary, a financial summary for the account. So for example, Air Namibia has got an eligible product, which is a savings account. They've got a 50% propensity to utilize this product, and they have not yet utilized it. We've got our product holdings, so they've currently got a current account, and we can see the available balance, available limit, the branch that it was taken out of. What you're looking at here is really a kind of a 360-degree view of this customer in Namibia as a corporate banking customer. We've got an offer saying that we have a fixed deposit rollover, and it is a normal priority in terms of the offer. So this is something that if we were interacting with a customer via a contact center, say, we would know that this is an offer that we can make to them by way of a cross-sell or an upsell offer. And then we've got available balances as well in a graphical view. So this is the finished product. I would now be walking through this, making sure that everything is correct, that all my views have the right information on them, check that I've got all the columns that I want to see, that is going to look good on the demo. It really helps to actually pretend you've got a real audience when you're doing that, rather than just talking it through in your head. Get your mother or your wife or somebody to listen. That makes a difference. When you are replaying this to a real person, it is amazing what you pick up. You want to confirm with the customer that they've got a room that is ready, that you've got a projector, If you are doing this over a remote technology like Microsoft Teams or some kind of web demo, you want to test that. You want to make sure that the customer has everything installed that's going to be necessary on their side, that audio is working, that your slides are presenting over the technology. Something small that I do just to make life a little easier, there's a handy feature in Dynamics 365 called pinned records. So for example, Air Namibia is a recently viewed record, and I've pinned it so that I can get to it really easily. So all of the key records that I'm going to be showing in the demo, occasionally what you'll do in the flow of the demo is you might be asked a question and you go off elsewhere to go and answer it, and you might want to be able to quickly get back to the record you're on, or that you were on. So those recent records is handy. So this is the sort of thing that I'm doing ahead of the demo just to make sure that I'm prepped and ready. And then on the day, be early. Get there as early as you can. You just don't want to be left unprepared and flustered when you arrive at the demo. So better to arrive half an hour early and have a cup of coffee. So you've done all your preparation, you've done lots of dry runs, you've checked all the technology is going to work. It's the day of the demo. Now you can just relax and go in with full confidence that you're ready and prepped, and just have fun and enjoy it. It's completely normal that you're going to be nervous on the day. The more preparation you've done, the less nervous you'll be. You can relax and you really can have fun, and if you're having fun, it's more likely that your audience will have fun too. And for them, this is an experience. They're looking at something new and exciting that they haven't seen before. Something that I try to do is keep notes. One of the first things I put into those notes is everybody's names around the table. And then I'll try and use their name as much as possible within reason. You don't want it to sound cheesy. But that's a small touch that really seems to make a difference in terms of being able to connect and build rapport with people as you're doing your demo. People start gathering into the room, or even if you're doing a remote demo, it's unusual that everybody will just be there and ready to go. So use the opportunity to chat to people, ask them what they do in the business, understand how that fits in. Invariably what even starts happening then, if you're waiting for a while, is people start talking. You've got an opportunity to ask them about their business. The more you can learn ahead of the demo, things that you can then reuse when you're doing the demonstration to kind of create clarity and point to specific examples. One of the first things you want to do in your sequence, and typically I have a couple of slides that go with the demo. Ideally, you want to keep the slides to a minimum. You want to be showing the tool. One of the things I do with slides is build my own credibility so that they are believing what I'm telling them. So I will just paint the picture of my experience. And again, you don't want to be more than a few minutes. Something that I've learned from hard experience is you want to encourage questions during a demo. And when you do get questions, the tendency, if you haven't had a lot of experience with this, is to kind of try and get back to your demo script. The mistake would be to try and deal with that question quickly and get it out of the way and go back to your demo. Customers generally, from experience, I found they don't like that. They're asking a question for a specific reason. They want an answer and they want a convincing answer. If you answer that question with conviction and in detail so that they can understand it, they'll be completely satisfied and they'll now be all ears listening to what you have to tell them next. But if you don't, they'll be looking for the next opportunity to test you. Part of what they're doing there is they are testing how much do you know, how organized are you going to be able to go with the question, or is it going to freak you out? Yeah, these are things that typically happen. So pause what you're doing, answer the question fully, check with the customer, ask them, are you happy that I've answered the question now? Wait until they're completely satisfied and then get back to where you were. And you may need to also just say, now remember where I was, this is where I am in the story, let's carry on. And don't let any frustration or feelings that you may have show. If you keep getting distracted, take the time, they'll be more satisfied if you answer their questions. There's of course a limit to that. Sometimes there's one person in your demo who is trying to derail things, and typically what happens is they start getting under pressure from the other people in the room to drop it and get back on track. So let that happen naturally, you'll see. Something that I try to do is something that I call the anti-sell. So clearly if you're demonstrating software to a potential buyer, and potentially this could be worth millions in terms of services and licensing, so you're clearly in sales mode. But what I talk about with the anti-sell here is coming across as a consultant rather than a salesperson. And it's a subtle thing, but it's really about treating what you're showing and the information you're gathering in a consultative manner. In other words, you are there out of service to this prospect or customer, and you are trying to help them with functionality and features that you have, as opposed to getting into bandstanding mode. And it's subtle, this. So what I would rather say is be enthusiastic. Of course you should be enthusiastic about what you're showing, but there's a subtle difference between getting into bandstanding mode and letting a natural enthusiasm and excitement for what you've prepared and what you're showing shine through. So for example, if you see that a particular feature or something is interesting to someone, you can look up and go, it's cool, isn't it? You know, something like that, as opposed to going, oh, have I got the coolest feature for you? So it's really about being genuine, being consultative, and being there out of service to that prospect, trying to help them as much as you can. It's a mindset rather than anything else. If you've had any experience in doing demonstrations, you will have come across the demo gods. And typically technology goes wrong in demos. It happens every time, so be prepared for that going in. Don't get flustered when it happens. It's going to happen. And typically, this is not the first rodeo for most customers. They've been in many demos. They know that things typically go wrong in demos, and they're not going to view you really negatively if you've done your preparation and you know what you're talking about and something goes wrong, they will understand. So try and stay calm, try and get back on track as best you can. Typically, if you then get back on track and you have stayed calm, they will view that very favorably. If you can come out of it shining and carry on with the demonstration, that is really viewed very positively. If something is just really not going to work, then accept that, apologize, and offer to come back and continue when things can be working. I guess it's important here to also just be honest, right? So if you're asked a question that you really don't know the answer, rather than trying to make something up or take the little bit you know and exaggerate it, just be frank and say, you know what, that's a good question. I'm actually not sure. I think I might know the answer, but rather than me give you something unprepared, I will come back to you with a real answer on something. That's really important. You can get caught out horribly, and don't let that happen to you. Just be honest. There's no need to point out things that you don't know, but if they come up and you test it and you don't know the answer, just offer to get back to someone. It's ideal if you can have at least one buddy in the room. I mentioned taking notes. Typically, each question that the customer is answering, if you win this business, or even if you need to overcome objections later on in the sales cycle, that information is going to be really helpful and really crucial. Really, there's a lot going on in a demo like that. There's a lot being said. Sometimes you've got 2, maybe 3 conversations going on at a time. What you really want to be doing is listening carefully to each one of those and looking for things that may help you later in terms of requirements people are talking about, potentially subtle tones about objections they may be having. I mean, they may even be talking about things that the last competitor in the demo was showing and how much better or worse they were than yours. All of this is really important intelligence. So if you can have a buddy in the demo that's kind of looking out for these things, even helping you make notes. Typically, I don't leave that to chance though. I'm trying to do both things at once, show people things and also make notes of things. I've got quite good at kind of keeping both going there. But that's really, really important. Keep good notes. And that's the demo. I mean, there really is nothing better and nothing more satisfying, genuinely, than you have done your preparation, you've done the research, you've set up your demo really well. Because you were prepared, you demonstrated it well, you took time to answer questions, and you get that wow from customers on occasion. They're looking at something and they're looking at each other and they're going, this is awesome. Just gives you the most incredible kick. And especially if you're helping them, if they've got a problem in their business that you can help solve with this tool, it is a tremendous feeling. If you do all of the things that I've learned to do over time, really that will happen more often than not. And it's a lot of fun. It's really enjoyable.
So this is what I've learned about doing CRM software demos over the years. I really hope you found it useful. This particular video is erred on the side of informative rather than entertaining. So in the next video, I'll try and swing the balance. So if you're interested in this kind of content, do hit the subscribe button in YouTube. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments here. Any questions or thoughts you may have would be great. and I'll see you in the next video.